Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely important.
You can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead. Kelly and I recently recorded a Q&A session with Add2DC in January, and Add2DC is a group of talented, driven young professionals in the marketing and advertising world in the DC metro area where we are located. They are organized through the AAF, formerly Ad Club, for those of you in our area. And this is for people 32 years and younger. And they are
a group for which, among which we no longer belong.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I am now way out of that. So in that recording, Kelly and I are top three moms that we believe define our careers. And so be sure to follow us on social media to listen when it's scouted from all different where marketing and advertising students, professionals, interns have thrown questions out. And so we've got your answers.
Yes, we do. Am I starting to ask the questions?
Yeah.
All right. They had some good questions in there. So I'm going to get
so many good ones.
I'm going to get going here. Let's see. This one's a really good one. They asked, how long should you stay at a job, even if you're miserable? Is there still a 1-year rule? And when do you know it's time to move on and find a new job?
So I love that we are starting with this question because it is something I asked myself just about every few months during my first few years in the working world. If you remember from our very first episode, I graduated college and went into sales and didn't feel like it was a match for me. And then I went and became a corporate concierge, which was a bomb job, loved it. But I felt like it didn't fulfill all my hopes and dreams. And so there were definitely periods of unhappiness during those years. And I definitely wondered if I was going to find the place where I belonged. So that's why I love this question. So this is 3 questions in one, and I'm going to start from the top. And Kelly, please add something if you have any. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this too. So the first question is, how long should you stay at a job? And here's my personal take. I want yours too, Kelly. I think you should stay for at least 2 years. I think 2 years gives you enough time to really understand the company you're working for, their processes. It gives you time to really understand the client, if you're at an agency, your duties. It allows you to be long-term planning, not just day-to-day. And you can develop specific skills or a portfolio that you can then market in a new position, if it's in a new agency or a place, or even if you are working your way up. But with that said, I don't think there's a magic number. It's really, I think, more about what you get out of it. And from an employer's point of view, I mean, there's so much advice there. I did a Google search. I wanted to see what like the internet was saying. And there's so much like recruiter advice, which I don't know if it's really helpful, honestly, because I feel like recruiters depend on a checklist of criteria to vet a candidate before they present them to a hiring manager. So they're like a pickier, and, you know, if you're not a recruiter, you're just an employer, you may have a different checklist. So you definitely do need to think of longevity in a position as it looks from a big picture, right? Whether you're going through a recruiter or going directly to apply for a position direct. If you just had one job that lasted shorter than a year, I think it can be easily explained away. There was a certain situation, right? But if you've jumped from job to job in short periods of time, um, like the leapfrog approach, it could work against you, I think. Um, and leapfrog, I mean by using your job experience and salary to leap to another job where you get a boost in the salary or title, and then you keep doing that to work your way up the ladder. But you're not really working up the ladder. You're just leapfrogging to jump past tiers. Anyways, we can talk about my opinions about that strategy in another podcast. So I don't know. Before I continue, Kelly, what do you think? What do you think is your magic number?
I think you're right on as far as a resume is concerned in terms of 2 years. And we're going to, if we can get our guts up, we're going to do an entire episode on failures. And one of my failures is I have quit a job without having another job that I was really miserable in. And my main advice would be never quit a job without having another job ready for you. That's the first thing. The second thing is that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. So is there another way?
Hey, can you hear me?
Oh, I can now.
Oh, you came back.
Oh, you couldn't hear me.
Yeah, you were frozen and then I couldn't hear you for a second.
All right, should I repeat?
Yeah, go back to just start with your magic number and we'll just edit that little portion out.
No worries. I agree with you that 2 years is the right amount of time to stay at a job. Where I do vary from you is that I think people quit bosses, not jobs.
Totally. And I was going to get into that too.
Yeah. And so if that's your problem, that's a different problem and that's a solvable problem. And
Agreed.
That's where and I've made this mistake, and we're going to talk about this on a failure episode at some point, where I didn't admit how I was feeling to a boss because I was too afraid.
Yeah.
And I don't think you should be afraid to tell your boss what your issues are. Is it something that your boss is doing that they just need to be made aware of? Is there micromanagement involved? Is there, what is it that, do you want more autonomy? Do you want more independence? Do you want to feel like your voice is being heard? So I think you need to give it a voice and express what your opinions are. And that's a mistake that I've made in my past that I won't make again. And I don't want the people underneath me to make that. So if they have an issue, I want them to make me aware of it, something I'm doing. I need to hear about it because as long as I'm aware, that I can change it. If I'm not aware, then I won't change it. And so I think that's the biggest issue is people think that this is the way things are. But if you actually voice your opinions, maybe you can actually report to somebody else.
Agreed.
Maybe there's a solution. Maybe you can realign the job and say, you know what, I don't like this aspect of my job. Can I switch it with this person that they're better at XYZ? So express what it is that your frustration is.
And you almost exactly answered what I was going to say to the answer of the question about being miserable. And I think, before you make decision based on your feelings, you have to take stock of the root of the issue. Yeah. And I think the process of that will help you grow in your approach to tough situations, which you'll surely encounter throughout your career. And this is where I think having a mentor or a group of peers to help you work through issues by being a soundboard is helpful. So if you find that root of your misery, which I think is often the broken communication between your boss or your coworkers, you need to find a way to address it and make it better. And I started thinking, like, one of my really good friends very early in our careers, she invested her time into learning the skills to have difficult conversations. Whereas I kind of learned the hard way. She actually spent time reading books and stuff. So I'd highly recommend looking for something that piques your interest in terms of just go on Amazon, look for difficult conversations in business. There's a bunch of books. Or LinkedIn Learning has courses on this. It's a skill we don't think about. But as you said, Kelly, people quit jobs because of their boss and their environment, probably more than just being miserable at the job with the actual work.
Yeah. You don't want to stay a job that you're miserable at. So you got to do everything in your power to try and change it if you can. And if you can't, then you leave.
Yep. Totally. Okay. Next question to Kelly. How do you find an advertising mentor?
So for me, it's always come quite naturally. You just have to look in
too.
front of you. I've never had to look for a mentor. There are always people around who I can learn from. And maybe if they initially weren't a mentor, maybe they became a mentor later. It's a matter of being open to it. So you need to look and see, is there someone that you look up to within your agency or organization? If there's not someone inside your agency, look outside. There might be someone that you know or you previously worked for or are associated with. Who are your role models? Make the ask. Figure out a way to make a pitch to say, hey, and I actually did this recently. We're a part of the ICOM Association of advertising agencies, small advertising agencies. And there was another head of an agency, a woman who had more experience than I do running an agency. And I said, will you be my mentor? I still have to learn. We all have to learn. And she was excited to be asked. People are excited to be asked. So, make the ask, be brave to do that. Make it easy for them. Take them to lunch, take them to pick their brain, and just let it evolve organically. But there's, other ways to find mentors through advertising groups and networks and women's groups. And as I mentioned, my mentors were all my first bosses, I think, in my 20s. And it evolved.
Yeah, it's so much easier to find one, I think, today, because there's so many online resources.
Yeah, that's true. And now it's funny because then now when you get to our level, you start to look for coaches or people that are at your same level that have similar experiences. So you just put yourself out there and ask.
And we also kind of go in depth into this question a little more in our Add to DC interview.
We do. That's correct.
So just another plug for that.
So the next question that people asked was, how do you ask for promotion?
Ooh, this is a good one because I asked for many and got turned down. As you, but I think when you're approaching this, it's so important to keep in mind that there are many factors that influence whether or not you will get a raise, many which are unrelated and certainly out of your control. But I think it comes down to three things. One, your performance. Two, your relationships. And three, your agency, account, company, economic environment, right?
Yes.
So I'll just say a little bit about those things. So your performance. How long has it been since you had a review or even your last raise? It's hard to make the case for a raise if it's been shorter than a year, unless you've had a huge win that warrants it, such as, winning new business. That's like the hugest one, but like also smaller wins could be like, how have you brought in a new project, create revenue, gotten major recognition from a client, etc. Without those, I think it's hard to make a case. And I'll talk about that in a second. The second bucket, relationships, do you have a boss that's going to be receptive, especially if they have to go to someone else and make the case to get the raise for you? If you don't have that, obviously that's going to be tougher. And then also, this also kind of ties back to performance, but, have you had positive feedback from the person that you're going to ask the raise from? Have your coworkers, your clients, maybe even vendors talked about you in a positive way? And then also related, have you achieved goals from the point of view of the people that would be giving you the raise? How did they feel? How are you positioned, so to speak? And then that third bucket is environment. So I think you have to be really strategic when you're asking the actual timing of the ask. So like it's not a good time when things are harried. It's not a good time when your boss is like knee deep in work and working on a pitch, right? To go ask this.
2020 was not a good year to ask for a raise too.
Yeah. 2020 wasn't, because economically it's just hard to justify it for anybody, even though, people really outperformed in so many ways this year, and were, crafty and flexible and made things happen in such a tough time. So the other thing is, speaking of that, is the company doing well, right? That's something that may not be in your control. While your account might be killing it, there might be 5 other accounts that aren't. And that's just a factor you can't control. So I think, to round out the answer to this question, I also have to address, how are you actually going to go ask for the raise, knowing that there's like lots of things that affect it, right? I think you need to research what you're worth, right?
Absolutely.
So there's lots of industry averages. This is from AMA magazine. Of course, it's not showing because I have this great virtual background. But they, and I know AAF does a yearly survey on this, but you want to kind of get a benchmark, right? It's going to be different in your agency or your job, especially and also because of your geographic region, but you kind of just want to get a sense of where you should be, right? If you're way off, that makes a pretty good case. Second, going back to the performance, you have to have documents of your achievements. Like, don't go in for a conversation that's like super laid back about this. I think you need to have a piece of paper in front of you where your achievements, your accomplishments, your added value, places where you've made relationships, maybe even it's even actual revenue numbers, or stuff from accounting, if you have your hands on that, and create that compelling reason to ask for a raise. And then lastly, prepare yourself emotionally. Because there are so many factors, and no boss wants to have this kind of conversation with someone who's over emotional or acts entitled to the raise that they are asking for and don't yet have. So anything to add, Kelly?
I have 2 things to add.
Okay, good.
A, never ask for a raise by email.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to say that. I meant to say ask face to face.
It's got to be face to face, and I'm just in shock
And no
when that
phone
happens.
either. No phone either. Like, get the emotional connection.
That's the
Don't
same
be
thing
emotional.
with quitting a job, by the way. If you quit a job by email, that's just not a way to go out.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is don't make it a threat.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's a good point.
I've had people make threats before, like, if you don't give me this, I'm going to leave or whatever, because then how can you not think they're going to do it again? And it's going to be constantly upping the ante. Well, this year I gave you that much, and then next year you're going to threaten me again, and every year it becomes a threat. And then it's that you've lost all the trust that was built there. So those are my only 2 other things.
That's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to add, if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, meaning you didn't get the raise, but you have a boss who's really appreciative and gives you lots of praise and finds a lot of value in what you bring to the table, I think you can do 2 things. You can ask to book time to create a plan for what will get you to your goal. Is that a raise? Is it, which would necessitate a raise, right? I was skipping to my next one. And make sure you frame that plan in terms of skills that you're going to get, and then the benefits to your team, and not just money. And I think you need to be direct. What do I need to do to get to that raise, to get to that next level?
Development plan. Your boss really should be providing you with a development plan. And if they haven't been providing you with one, then ask.
Exactly. And then think of alternatives. If you don't get that money, maybe you could get a better title, or you could get a couple of extra vacation days.
An extra work from home day if things go back to normal.
Yeah. Or maybe it's even a special project with another team, or leeway to go I was recently reading something about how a boss gave a feedback to someone that they needed to find time in their schedule to carve out creative thinking time
I love that.
where they are not at their computer, where they are not focused on a checklist of things to do, and they tell everyone they're having that time. Maybe that's time that would be great for you to ask for.
Love it.
Anyways.
Love it.
Okay, next. Okay. Honestly, this is my actual favorite question of this whole episode. So I'm super intrigued by your answer. What's the most important non-marketing skill you look for when you're hiring, Kelly?
So of course I'm going to give a story for this, but I'll give the answer first.
Okay, good. I like stories.
I call it reliable with a kick.
Okay.
You and I both ran track, right?
Yeah.
And you ran the hurdles.
I
You must
did.
be taller than me, right? How tall are you?
I'm almost 5'8".
Oh, you are taller than me because I was never tall enough to do the hurdles. So one of the races that I ran, my favorite races that I ran was the mile relay. And
Oh, I thought you were going to say the 4x4. Anyways.
well, it's the same thing, 4x4, yeah.
Oh, oh my gosh. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the 4x4. That is my absolute favorite race. And for a variety of reasons, and I'll tell you the story. So when I was in high school, my story is I wasn't really good enough to run the 440 by itself, or I was really intimidated, but I wasn't as intimidated to run it at the 4x4 where I'm part of the team. And so I could run a strong 64 on a good day back in high school. That was a long time ago. And so the meet before districts, it's the qualifying meet before districts. What happened was the coaches, the day of the meet, the coach said, we had the 4 women that were going to be on our team. And one of the women kept coming up for practice late. And so the coach pulled her the morning of the meet.
Yowzer.
And put her in her place, my best friend. I adore my best friend, but she's a 67, 68 at best, right? So
you're like, oh man, she's going to slow us down.
So I'm always the kicker. I'm always the last person, at least I was at the time. And I loved being the kicker. That was my thing. And we get the race. And there's a lot of things that you're thinking about with the mile relay. You have to make sure that you stay in your lane. You have to figure out, are you going to be on the inside lane? Are you going to be on the outside lane? And you have to make up all that time. You have to think about the transition between handing the baton from someone handing it to you. Are you going to smoothly grab it? Are you going to drop it, which you never want to do? And are you going to be able to get going as soon as you get it? And then how do you pace yourself when you get the baton? So in this particular race, I was so angry that my friend, I was happy to have my best friend in the race, but I was really angry that the woman who was really good was pulled out of the race. And she was the one that was supposed to give me the baton before the 440. And so when I got the baton, we were dead last. And not by a minor amount. And I was so angry that I dug in and I just ran my heart out. And I went around the first corner, angry, and I knock off one person. Second corner, knock off the third person. The back 100, I'm getting off the fourth person. And I went around to the last 225 and I started to go all out. I picked off the fourth to last person. And then I'm getting into the last 100 yards and I win from dead last to winning. And it was all pure adrenaline. The best race I ever ran. We made it to districts, which we hadn't even thought we were going to be able to do. But it's an important lesson. If you can look at it from my perspective, you can look at it from the other team members' perspectives, and you can look at it from the coach's perspective. And now looking back on it, however many years later, I'm looking at back from a coach's perspective. The coach had to teach a lesson to the runner who wasn't coming on time. So reliability was really, really important to him. So it was more important for him to put in the dependable, reliable runner than it was to win the race. Okay. But he also somehow had something in the back of his mind realizing Kelly's got the kick. And so she might make up for it. Yeah. So he had all of these things as a coach that he was able to pull out from each of us, which ultimately helped us win the game. And that's what you are as as a leader, is you're trying to pull out these various things out of out of the various people that you work with, and you're collaborating with them. And so
Yeah.
that reliability with the kick is what I think is really important. And you can, what does that mean? It really means a reliable kicker is someone who has a strong work ethic, someone with integrity. They have fire, they have energy, they have confidence, they have someone who takes initiative. And so my job is really to take someone from an enthusiastic beginner to a self-reliant achiever. And it works both ways. And so that's my answer to that question. Reliable kicker.
And I think there are so many ways that candidates can develop that skill and show that skill, whether it's in their resume or their portfolio. You name it, you can show that reliability with a kick for sure.
Anything to add?
No, I love that. I love that. I mean, we could get super granular and talk about very specific things like, oh, you should be a volunteer. But I think your answer was so much better because, that's the type of quality that you're looking for. And now it's up to you as the person who's applying for a job and trying to get to know the interviewer or whoever to show that in your own unique way.
The other rule I have is no a-holes. I will not hire an a-hole. No way.
You know what? I also won't. Anyways, I will digress. I will digress.
All right. So the next question is, how often do people switch disciplines in advertising, and do agencies support that?
Okay. So I don't think this happens often, but as you said in another episode, Kelly, your career is not a ladder. It's a jungle gym. And so this question made me think about a post I saw on Instagram that said, sometimes it's about the pit stops, which is kind of similar to what you said, Kelly.
I love that.
Yeah. The account is called The Internship, with intern with a U instead of an E. They're actually a virtual internship program that connects people in the marketing and advertising world with industry members that embraces the detour, which I love.
I had to really think about that. You have to almost say that slow to get that or visually see it.
Yeah, I know. And they feature a ton of rising advertising stars that have not had a straight line to where they get to get them where they can tap into their true passion. So all that said, it does happen. I think maybe the best piece of tangible advice I can give is that you'll have to prove your interest and skills in moving from one position to another, especially if your peers or boss feel like you're talented where you are, right? Like, why would I move this person if they're really bringing value to the table and we like having them as part of our team? So you'll have to make the case for why you'll be an asset in another department. I also wanted to say, kind of makes me go back to my argument for working in a small agency first. Obviously, that's where I come from. So it's, I see it as where you can really get your hands in all types of different work, production, art, media buying. And from there, when you see the opportunity, you can make your case. I'm sure this is doable at larger agencies because they may be even more open to moving you from department to department because, they have resource wiggle room that smaller agencies have. But I do think it's totally doable. And if you want to, you should go for it. If you're young and starting off your career, there's no reason to get stuck in a rut so early on. Okay.
Good answer. I have another question for you, which is very similar to what you were talking about. If you start out an agency with a niche, will I be adopting that niche for my whole career? And how easy or hard will it be for me to break out of that in my next job role?
Yeah, I think I'm sure you'll have some opinions on this one too, Kelly. I love this question because it gets back to kind of what my mind initially goes is to the age-old debate of, should I be a generalist or a specialist?
Yes.
And I'm 100% all in on being a specialist because I essentially have been. my entire career for the most part. But that's also because I've been working for 20 years. So if I think back to, my first couple of years of being in the working world, I think my overall advice, and I think I say this also in the Add to DC interview, is that go where the best opportunities lie for you at the time, right? You can't orchestrate the perfect job, right? So if the opportunity in front of you is a role that will help you sharpen your skills and knowledge in a niche, do it. You can always reevaluate after 2 years and see if you're happy or if you're wanting to learn outside of that niche and make the necessary changes, right? That's the beauty of being young in your career, is the ability to change. And then on the other side, if it's a role where you're going to get more general experience, go for it, because you can always niche down when the right opportunity comes along. So let me end by answering the, will it be easy or hard? And it really depends on how you position your experience and expertise in your next role. So it's a great opportunity for you to learn everything you know about marketing and advertising and branding, to market yourself, right? So there's lots of skills and experience that you can learn while being in a niche, that you can then spin and position as an asset to another niche or being a generalist. I also think that, define niche, right? Like if you work at at a big agency and you're working in retail, you could say retail is a niche, but it's quite a large one. Similar with nonprofit work. If you are a generalist who's been working in the retail niche and you want to work for nonprofits, there's so much that can be applied. And for sure, for-profit experience is really valuable when you're trying to break into nonprofit. So I wouldn't get too bogged down in those little details. Anything to add?
Well, yes, I would say the opposite in terms of when you're in college, when you're in your 20s, I think you need to have a broad as education as possible. Liberal arts, humanities, broad general advertising, and you narrow down later in your career. You absolutely want to narrow down later because that's how you sell yourself. But once you have the broad base, then you narrow down. So I think it's go wide first and then narrow is the approach that I would head. But again, I come from a different background with a bigger agency background, and you started a smaller agency, and so you had that niche. So I think it really depends on the person and the interest, but that's my personal opinion.
And where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
Because you have no control over what that is, right?
Sure.
But I agree with you. If you were looking at, let's just say, something that's much more apples to apples, so a big agency where you had either generalist or a niche opportunity, it may be that getting that general experience is better when you are just starting out. Okay, so my last question for you, Kelly. What advice would you give to your younger self just starting out? Rewind the clock.
I love this question. I definitely don't want to go back in time.
In your mind. Rewind the clock in your mind.
If I had, these are the things that I would do. And it's really a one-liner. I would have been more confident.
Yes.
Way more confident and care less about what people think. Those are the two things, hands down, that I wish I would have felt at the time. And I think that's a part of growth and comes with age and experience. Having more faith in my abilities, which is, hard to do when you're in your 20s because you don't really know where you stand. We've talked about this one. Don't play office politics. Just don't do it. Another one that someone told me was act as if you were already the VP. Act as if you're already the president of the agency. And what does that mean? If you think about what decisions a VP might make versus an AE, it gives your mind a little bit of a shift in perspective. And it thinks about, you're looking at a broader view versus a micro task. And I think that's a big lesson that I would also bring in, to think about things from a different perspective and how your boss is looking at what it is that you're doing and how it fits into the larger piece of the pie. It makes you, become more accountable. And dress the part. If you come in a t-shirt, you may be treated like a kid in a t-shirt. Act the part that you want to be, right? We've talked about this many times. Read more, be a sponge, ask more questions, attend more conferences. I would have worked more on my writing skills, my speaking skills.
Me too.
I would have learned to network better earlier. Before LinkedIn existed.
Before LinkedIn, I still have my old Rolodex.
I still have mine too. I'd be afraid to see who was still on there that had the same number. Ask for more responsibility is a big one. Take more risks. That's what your 20s is for. And I took a lot of risks in my 20s. And I'm really glad that I did. That's the time to take risks, not when you have young children. When you're not attached, when you're not rooted in one singular place, that's the time to experiment. Don't hold back your opinion. We talked a little bit about this earlier.
Yeah. Well, in another episode too.
Mm-hmm. Be political about it, but give your opinion. Ask for what you deserve. And brush up on your technical expertise. For AEs, that's Excel and PowerPoint, and even those that are outside your day-to-day, like look how valuable someone who knows Canva is right now, right? Or InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop. Getting those certifications gets me really excited. Does someone have Google Analytics, Google AdWords, Facebook certifications, PM certifications? Those sort of things really show to me that, this person is rooted in what they want to do and still continuously learning. Stress less, do more yoga. I would have told myself that. I did a lot of yoga, but I would have done more. Laugh more, have more fun. Realize that those friends that you have now may just be your best buds when you're 50. And I think my last bit of advice was I would have taken all my money out of the stock market before 2008. So I didn't lose so much, and invest in Apple stock. And then I wouldn't have planned any trips for 2020. So those are my advice.
My husband always says invest in Apple stock too.
Yes.
That's I think he bought I don't know, his parents got him one share or something crazy like that. Well, I love all of those. I love to end with the confidence thing. I too definitely think that would have been something that I would have really served me well starting out. All right. Well, that's all of our questions today. Again, a reminder, follow us on social media so you can see the interview that we did with Add2DC. There are a couple of other fun questions for all of the young marketing and advertising stars out there. And follow us on social and go to twomarketingmoms.com.
Thank you.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a podcast review or send us a message at twomarketingmoms.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.